What's up, guys? Welcome to Daily Dose of Reddit. This is your host, Zach, and today's subreddit is r/IDontWorkHereLady. This story's called I Don't Work Here Anymore, Sergeant Major. After my last post got so much attention here, I thought I'd share my favorite I Don't Work Here story from the day I got out of the military. Backstory time. So, as a few may remember from my last Tonight post, I have PTSD, and like many soldiers, it took me a long time to admit it to myself, and longer to admit it to others. Before I really knew much about it, or even thought that I had it, I still knew something was wrong with me, and also, like many soldiers, I started to self-medicate. At first it was just alcohol, which turned into more alcohol, which turned into Adderall, which turned into coke, ecstasy, and basically anything else I could get my hands on. Now, I tried not to let it affect my work, but that's pretty hard to do in the military. And eventually, this all led to a nervous breakdown that led to me getting caught, losing my E5 rank, and eventually admitting to my leadership what was going on, and I asked for help. Luckily, my leadership liked me and cared about me and allowed me to go to the military version of Alcoholics or Narcotics Anonymous on the stipulation that I made regular visits with mental health as well. Now then, while my immediate leadership cared a lot more about me than I deserved, these eventually made my battalion sergeant major, my boss's boss in civilian speak, absolutely hate me. He already had an issue with me before because of a joke I had made when first meeting him. He was from an engineer unit that had been doing some kind of mining work before being transferred, so I asked if that wouldn't make him a sergeant minor instead of a sergeant major, a joke I still stand by. Normally, this wouldn't really be a big issue as lower enlisted wouldn't have much interaction with someone of his rank, but I was a bit of a special case. I never came down from PCS, or permanent change of station orders, so I spent all 8 years of service at the hellhole that is Fort Stewart, Georgia. Being such a seemingly permanent fixture in my unit, it wasn't unusual for me to be tasked to give new NCOs of my company tours of the base and battalion/brigade areas. For the 3 ID soldiers in the audience, we were at the then new brigade area off main post out the back gates on the way to Savannah, as well as introduce them to the S-Shop personnel, or offices that run the day-to-day paperwork and stuff that keep the army organized and running, as I knew most people there and on base. Hell, for a little while, I had even dated a family friend of a brigade commander and sat in on a few poker games with them, the base commander, and other higher-ups. This led to me interacting with Sergeant Major more than I should have since I was in the battalion area, more than I normally would have been, and also led to more dislike from him since he perceived me as having more influence than I should have. I didn't really have much, or any influence, but from time to time when meeting and passing the brigade commander would say hi to me, so the Sergeant Major knew I had played a few games with the big boys on base. Okay, longest backstory ever, now over, on to the event. So it was my last day in the unit, and I had just gotten my elusive and highly sought-after Bulldog stamp, which is what the base personnel office uses to signify that you've completed all paperwork and are released from the post, as well as my DD-214, which states I'm no longer in the military. I wasn't quite done at the post though, as a lot of the guys in my company were throwing a going-away party for me. Just about everyone in my company was there, except for my best friend, who we'll call Nate, who was stuck on staff duty, a 24-hour shift where you basically just answer phone calls from wives angry that their husbands are working so much and breaking up drunken fights or unlocking barracks doors for soldiers that lock themselves out. Now, Nate and I had went to basic training together, and were lucky enough to be stationed at the same unit together, and he'd been there for as long as myself. We spent damn near every second together for 8 years at this point. We'd been through 3 deployments, multiple firefights, he was there when my ex-fiancée left me, and was the guy who very literally drugged me out of bed and dressed me and forced me to go out when my depression got so bad I couldn't make myself get out of bed. He was the best friend I have ever and will ever have. So I'm sure as hell not leaving without saying goodbye to him, of course. Since he couldn't be there, we had plans the next day together, and I was just crashing at his place that night. Anyway, the party came and went, we laughed and cried and got admittedly way too drunk, and after it was over, drunk me walked to the battalion area to get Nate's keycard. This was maybe 11 p.m. or midnight, so I didn't worry about running into anybody. Plus, I was in civilians, so I wasn't worried about someone there thinking I'm on duty or anything. So I walk in, and of course, true to my luck, was the Sergeant Major, talking to the staff duty NCO. I was drunk, clumsy, and loud, so he noticed me straight away.
"Scratch that, Sergeant. Looks like OP here shown up to volunteer to buff the floors. They better shine by the time I see you at PT."
Me? Drunk, happy, and not wanting to end on drama. Roger that, Sergeant Major. He walks off to do whatever, and both Nate and his NCO laugh, knowing I'll be long gone by PT, and the only part I'd taken in buffing the floors was to possibly stand on the buffer while Nate works it. This helps scratch the wax off before adding the new coat, and is also fun as hell while drunk. After a bit of chat, I grab the keycard from Nate and turn around to leave, and damn near plow right into the Sergeant Major.
"I told you to start on the floors 30 minutes ago. What the hell have you been doing?"
Sorry, Sergeant Major. I'll get right on that.
"No, you've had your chance, and you've had more than enough since you've been here. You're getting another Article 15, and I'll have you out of the Army by the end of the year."
Obviously, he yelled this, as that's the only way he knew how to speak, so everyone heard him. An important part I forgot to mention was that I had gone straight from the base's offices to the party, so I still had my paperwork on me. With a huge drunken smile, I hold up my DD-214 in his face and yelling, though admittedly not nearly as loud, say, "The hell you will, Sergeant Major. I'm a civvy now, so you can suck my..." and calmly walk past him and out of the doors as he's literally frozen in shock, as it'd likely been 2 to 3 decades since someone had disrespected him like that, in public anyway. Admittedly, the walk was all show, and as soon as I was out of sight, I ran faster than I probably had on any PT test and didn't stop until I was inside Nate's room. Yes, I was younger and in much better shape than the Sergeant Major, but I had no delusions that I could take him. He'd been in the Army since 18, back at a time when soldiers were trained to be a different kind of soldier than they are today, and I doubt I would have survived the confrontation without needing surgery. And even if I did somehow win, I doubt the MPs would be kind to someone who assaulted a Sergeant Major. So that's the story. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I spent a couple of weeks after that fielding calls from guys in the unit asking if it really happened and became a bit of a legend when the story got around. Although to save time, I may have left out the part where I ran away before he could process what happened. For those wondering, I'm in a much better place now. I haven't been classified as an alcoholic in years and have been alcohol-free since November 2018, and haven't had a drug problem since my unit sent me to get help. I still see a therapist twice a month, and as many saw in my last post recently, got a service dog to help. But I'm on meds that work, and even recently had a job change going from 14 to 18 hours a day to working 11 max while still making $100 to $200 more a day. So life is pretty good despite the rough road here. Thanks for reading. This story's called Half Doinked in Costa Rica. A few years ago, I had the pleasure of spending 3 days in a delightful little beach town on the Pacific coast of Costa Rica called Samara. It was ostensibly a work trip, but truthfully, I only worked about 4 hours per day and spent the rest of the time being a beach bum. When it was time to leave, I took a shared shuttle service we'll call Awesome Bus back to my home base near the capital city of Costa Rica, San Jose. The way these shuttles work is that the routes are broken up into multiple legs of approximately 2 hours. This means that my 4-hour trip was broken up into 2 legs with a 30-minute stop in the middle. The stop location is usually a little touristy place with a restaurant and souvenir shop. At the stop, between legs, some people end up changing shuttles depending on their destination. This means that sometimes the 30 30-minute stops actually last longer, depending on how delayed some of the other shuttles are. For the first leg of the trip, my shuttle van was completely full. In fact, it was actually overbooked by one person, which means that someone would have to ride in the passenger seat next to the driver. I recognized two of the other passengers. They were a couple of young Swiss guys that I met in passing earlier that week. The remainder of the passengers were members of the same family from the United States. It was a dour-looking mom and dad with their 3 kids, including a teenage boy, his sister, who appeared to be about 10 years old, and the little brother who was probably 8 years old. By appearance, they were stereotypically US Americans. What's that supposed to mean? So I was the only party that was traveling solo. I took the front seat without saying anything to anyone except the driver. The first leg of the trip went relatively smoothly. Mom and dad, seated directly behind me, seemed to be in a snit with each other about something. Their kids in the back misbehaved a little bit, and mom chastised them. The mom and dad went back to conversation that sounded like audio disdain. I didn't pay much attention to them because I'd arrived half doinked and was having a great chat with the driver. While English is my first language, my Spanish was much better than his English, so the whole conversation was in Spanish. We talked about the Costa Rican national soccer team's deep run in the 2014 World Cup. We relived the unlikely victories over Uruguay and Italy, as well as the draw against the mighty England. Then we consoled each other, remembering the quarter-final match, when the Netherlands advanced on penalty kicks. We talked about our favorite local soccer teams. He supports the most popular domestic team in the country, Saprissa. I'm a diehard Herediano fan. I told him that I loved jokes, and he taught me a couple of dirty jokes in Spanish that I hadn't heard before. The 2 hours passed quickly. At the end of the first leg, we stopped at a lovely restaurant for our break. I grabbed a bottle of water for the road and a mid-morning cup of coffee. I found a seat at a long bar just on the edge of the open patio, still in the shade, but with a full view of the natural world just outside. The weather was beautiful, as it often is in Costa Rica. The sky was clear, and the light breeze was just enough to knock the edge of the mid-morning heat. Also, I was still half doinked. I got a second cup of coffee, and it was good coffee. Although Costa Rica is known for producing outstanding coffee, often what is sold domestically isn't always the best. My Costa Rican friends that are in the know tell me that almost all of the highest quality coffee is exported. However, since the restaurant was a regular, awesome bus hub with a steady stream of foreign tourists, they were serving an excellent cup of joe. As I got halfway into my second cup, I noticed some grumbling from the Gringo family. Mom seemed distraught that the next leg of our trip hadn't begun yet. Our 30-minute break had extended to 40 minutes. I didn't notice nor care. I was still half doinked. Mom marched over to the shuttle drivers and exclaimed, "This break was only supposed to be 30 minutes long. It's been 45 minutes. When are we leaving?" Our driver said,
"We leave soon, I tell you."
in his heavily accented English. I don't know how to do Costa Rican accents, so sorry. And then went back to the low-volume conversation with his coworkers. That didn't mollify her. She repeated the question at a higher volume.
"We leave in 15 minutes.
The driver said, with an increasingly uncomfortable look in his face. He glanced over at me as if to ask,
What the hell is the problem with your countrywoman here?"
I gave him the universal, "What are you gonna do?" shrug, turned around, and went back to my coffee. As I lifted my cup to my lips, I felt her presence directly behind me. She tapped my shoulder. I turned to face her. She clapped her hands in my face and yelled, "Hey, do you speak English?" In other circumstances, I may have met her aggression with more aggression, but as I mentioned before, I was half doinked, drinking a great cup of coffee, and in Costa Rica. I put a stupid smile on my face and shook my head in the negative. "Look, listen to me. I'll speak very slowly. You need to get the driver to get us back on the road." She was pantomiming the act of driving a car. I started to giggle. Instead, I answered again with a big, contrived smile and a few ambiguous head nods. but no verbal response.
Damn it!
She clicked with her tongue in retreat.
You would think that at least one of them would speak English.
She directed back to her husband.
We're spending thousands of dollars here and you'd think that they'd speak better English.
Dad just nodded. He's not stupid. Mom went back to Dad and the kids. I went back to my amazing coffee, sporting a bemused grin. Eventually, our extended break ended and we all headed back to the shuttle van. There wasn't much conversation on this leg of the trip. The air was tense. 2 hours later, we were returning to the city and each group would be dropped off at their individual hotel or lodging. The Swiss dudes were first to depart. As we drove to the next drop-off location, I realized that I would be the last passenger off of this van. The plan formed in my mind almost immediately. Despite the fact that I was still half doinked, my thinking was sharp and I knew what to do. Our little van rumbled down the narrow road and I smiled. When we arrived at the family's hotel, our driver jumped out to handle luggage and hopefully collect a well-deserved gratuity. I jumped out of the car too, meeting up with my friend, the driver, and the family as they collected to take possession of their substantial suitcases. As the driver was handing over the suitcases, I stood to the side, holding open one of the doors and putting on that stupid servile smile. Dad put a couple of bills into the hand of our driver and whispered, "Gracias." As our driver was closing the doors and the family was preparing to walk into the hotel, I cleared my voice and tightened my smile. "It was a pleasure meeting you all." I addressed my audience in a baritone chirp. "I hope that you enjoy the rest of your time in Costa Rica. Pura vida." Mom just looked at me, dumbfounded. I smiled. She coiled up, stuck out her finger, and stuttered,
You speak English! It is completely unprofessional of you to not help me when I needed help. We paid $300 for the shuttle. You can't treat your customers this way.
I smiled. Her anger intensified.
I'm reporting you to Awesome Boss. What is your name?
My name is Chifriho Jones. I'm half doinked and I don't work here, lady. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.